Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hello everyone, it's Zainab. Welcome back to my daily-ish reading of Shi'ism, Religion of Protest by Hamid Dabashi. So I'm just going to continue kind of where I left off last time I read to you, which was I think a couple of days ago now. I'm in chapter 2, page number 57. Chapter 2 is entitled Birth of a Revolutionary Faith. And on page 57, there is a section of the chapter that's entitled Birthing Shi'ism. So I'm going to start from there. Okay, in the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, all praise belongs to him, and peace and blessings to Prophet Muhammad and his pure family. All right. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. The crisis of succession that ensued immediately after the death of Prophet Muhammad, and he lived by the Gregorian calendar, he lived between the year 570 and 632. So he passed away in 632, which was in the 11th year of Al-Hijrah of the Islamic calendar. So 11 years after Islam began. Ultimately resulted in a major split in the Muslim community, one group following the active routinization of Prophet Muhammad's charismatic authority into the institution of caliphate, and the other, a much smaller group, seeking to perpetuate that charisma first in the figure of Imam Ali, the Prophet's cousin and son-in-law, and then after him in the institution of imamate, so the imams that succeeded Imam Ali, his two sons, and then his grandson and his great-grandson, and so on and so forth. The revolutionary figures of Ali, alayhi salam, the first Shi'i Imam, and after him his son Imam Hussein, the third Shi'i Imam, provided the history of Shi'ism with its two most militant ideal figures, two sons murdered by their own father figures. Not fathers, father figures, someone who was in the role of father or wali or authority at the time. These two defiant figures have subsequently become definitive to the doctrinal basis of Imama as the cornerstone of Shi'ism. The paradox definitive to Shi'ism takes shape and momentum right at this historical juncture when two iconic figures in the early history of Shi'ism take up arms against tyranny and lead a band of revolutionaries in two historic battles. The charismatic nature of Shi'ism, as a result, rests on an attempt to institutionalize a constitutionally anti-institutional charismatic movement. The result of the paradox is the perpetual narrative deferral of the Shi'i metaphors of revolt from one set of significant signs to another, in a permanent semiotics of defiance and revolt, generation after generation, in whatever language necessary, metaphors metamorphosing to meet a renewed pact with history, as exemplified in the respective works of Ali Shariati, who contemporized Shi'ism, Foro Farrokhzad, who poeticized it, remember the poem I read you a few days ago? And Mohsen Makmalbaf, who aestheticized it. The narrative deferral of Shi'ism has consistently sublated it into wider and vaster domains of global signification, where Shi'ism became ingrained in the cosmopolitan cultures in both occasioned and embraced. For Shi'ism to be receptive of its own innate transmutations into newer metaphors, it must remember the point of its origin in ever brighter terms. As a religion of protest, Shi'ism begins with the beginning of Islam itself, though its immediate causes are rooted in the crisis of succession that followed the death of the Prophet in the year 632. But the political conditions that resulted in the crisis of succession might in fact be traced back to the origin of Islam, the nature of Muhammad's prophetic authority, and the paradoxical disposition of the Quran. The history of Islam as a political movement begins with the commencement of the Islamic calendar in September the year 622, when Prophet Muhammad led a band of revolutionaries from Mecca to Medina to establish the first Muslim community and launch his incessant attacks against the Meccan establishment. This crucial migration, the most significant political move of the Prophet at the time, followed from more than a decade of quiet revelations and passive recruitment in Mecca. By the time of his death in 632, Prophet Muhammad had consolidated his reign over Arabia, unified Arabs in what they believed to be a divinely ordained dispensation, and left them with a body of Quranic revelations to sustain the course of their pious remembrance of his legacy as they went around the world and conquered an unimaginable expanse of the habitable earth. Two paradoxes composed the fundamental crisis that surfaced upon the death of Muhammad and that his community had to face. The first was Muhammad's charismatic authority, both revolutionary rebel and lawgiver. The second was the Quran that he revealed, which incites rebellion and commands obedience at the same time. Who was to succeed the Prophet, and by what authority? In Philip Rafe's theory of culture, the latter critical question, which he borrowed from Max Weber and expanded into its biblical origins, is definitive to its normative character. In his own essay, titled By What Authority? Post-Freudian Reflections on the Repression of the Repressive as Modern Culture, Rafe sought to characterize the advent of modernity as the inability or unwillingness to ask what has caused the Freudian repression. Rafe identified this inability as a primary repression of the repressive and the very conditio sine qua non of modernity, whatever that means. I don't know. Sorry. Rafe took this question of authority from the Bible, from Matthew chapter 21, verses 23 and 24, which say, and when he was come into, grammatically it doesn't make sense to me, but it says, and when he was come into the temple, the chief priests and the elders of the people came unto him as he was teaching, and said, by what authority dost thou these things? Do you do these things? I don't know. And who gave you this authority? And Jesus answered and said unto them, I have no time left.